Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Black Sisters Network, I'm delighted that we are collaborating with the University of Law to put on this important event tonight, Diversity Matters. This is a subject which is very close to my heart and also to my practice as an employment lawyer, which I'll speak a little bit about later. Membership is open to all solicitors and trainee solicitors, paralegals, students of African and Caribbean descent, and African descent in England and Wales, and any solicitor, trainee or paralegal who supports our aims and objectives of the BSN in relation to race, and it's irrespective of race, colour, creed. Membership is free to students, so please don't hesitate to visit our website and join us in our mission. So back to why diversity matters. It might sound obvious, but it's vital that the legal profession reflects at all levels the community it serves. Otherwise, there is a danger that you risk alienating those communities and groups that are unrepresented. It might help you if I tell you a little bit about me. My parents are Jamaican. I was born here in the UK, and I was born and brought up in South London in the 1970s and 80s. You might still hear my accent. I was the first in my family to go to university. I went to Middlesex University and I got a 2-1 in law. However, it took me 3 years, over 400 applications, and 20 interviews later before I was able to secure a training contract. So I fully understand how hard it can be to get a foot on the ladder into the legal profession. One thing that you students now have compared to what I had at your stage is that you have the benefit to access a lot more resources, networks like the BSN, and people like me who can help you in your career journey. And I was interested to hear also the comments that Morag made in terms of the efforts that the University of Law are trying to help people to both do well in their studies and also obtain training contracts, so that you really do have access to resources that I didn't have at your stage. So speaking from personal experience, when I was embarking on my legal career, it felt like it was a very scary place because there were scarcely any lawyers who looked like me or had the same experiences that I had. But at times it felt very lonely. However, with the support of my friends and family, I qualified in 1995. And over the past 25 years, I've managed to build a successful practice advising employers, predominantly in the public sector, and all aspects of employment and equality law. As well as being a director of the Black Sisters Network, which I'll tell you about more about later, I'm also the deputy chair of the Employment Lawyers Association. But anyway, enough about me. Let's get back to diversity matters. Some might say that surely we've cracked diversity. 2020, must have all done now. But it's useful to sort of recap on the UK's history when it comes to legislation on diversity and inclusion issues. Some of you who've studied employment law will probably be familiar with this, but for those of you who haven't, it's useful just to have a recap. So the first thing, which is not an employment piece of legislation, is the Sexual Offences Act in 1967. This decriminalised homosexual acts. In 1970, we had the Equal Pay Act, and in the 1976, 75 and 76, we had the Sex Discrimination Act and Race Discrimination Act, which made it unlawful to discriminate in the workplace on the grounds of sex or race. Then there was a gap of almost 20 years before any further legislation on discrimination issues. And that was the 1995 Disability Discrimination Act, and I remember that quite well because that came into force fairly shortly after I qualified, and that was seen as quite a radical piece of legislation, and that prevented discrimination against those who are disabled, both in the workplace and the provision of goods and services. There was a further gap of another 8 years before it was made unlawful to discriminate on the grounds of sexual orientation or religious belief. In 2004, it was again made unlawful to discriminate on the grounds of gender reassignment, And in 2006, it was made unlawful to discriminate on the grounds of age. As you can see, there's quite a lot of discrimination legislation at that stage. In 2010, the government decided to consolidate all the discrimination legislation into one act, the Equality Act 2010. Since then, we've had the gender pay gap regulations in 2017. So some might have you believe that because we've got all of this legislation around discrimination, that we fixed diversity. I'm sure most of you will agree that's clearly not the case. That's exemplified by the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements, which have gained mass appeal globally, challenging sexual harassment and racial inequality. Further, with the other protected characteristics, they also face continued challenges. And so we really are still in a place where we're having to fight for diversity and inclusion. So turning to this year, we've had the sort of double whammies of COVID and George Floyd. COVID has disrupted all of our lives in ways that none of us would have foreseen. There was a statement made at the beginning of COVID that COVID doesn't discriminate, but that's clearly not the case. And the data shows that COVID has had a disproportionate impact on those from Black and Asian backgrounds. This view is supported by the findings of a report commissioned by the Labour Party, authored by Baroness Doreen Lawrence, the mother of Stephen Lawrence, which concluded that structural racism led to worse outcomes from those from ethnic minority backgrounds. That's in relation to COVID. However, if COVID wasn't bad enough, we've also seen the killing of George Floyd. Seeing someone literally being killed on our screens purely because of the colour of their skin was beyond words. Sadly, though, this was not the first time this has happened, and it's unlikely to be the last. Incidents like this are not confined to America. They've happened here as well in the UK, and they happen across the world globally. However, I'm hopeful that in a perverse sort of way, George Floyd might, and I stress the word might, be a seminal moment in history of race relations globally. Why do I say this? The outrage about this incident was not confined to Black people. You may have seen on your screens marches across the globe shouting out Black Lives Matter and making the point that really enough is enough. We've got to stop this now. More pertinently to me, as an employment lawyer, for the first time in my career, I've seen employers wanting to be actively seen as anti-racist. This has involved them putting out statements on the subject and actively engaging with their staffs in conversation about race, which is commonly seen as the difficult protected characteristics to have a conversation about in the workplace. This is a positive development, but the test will be whether this momentum can be maintained and sustained into 2021 and beyond. It will be interesting to see what the government's Commission on Race and Ethnicity Disparities comes up with when it reports. Some might say that really all that commission needs to do is implement some of the recommendations that have come out of earlier reports on this issue. I refer to the McGregor-Smith report in 2017 regarding race at work generally, and also the Parker review also in 2017, which looked at ethnicity on the UK boards. So what next for diversity? I've spoken a lot about racism. However, there remain challenges in relation to other protected characteristics. For example, homophobic hate crime in London has increased by 55% in the last 5 years, and that's prompted calls for changes in the law. There's very public issues concerning anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and allegations of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party. And these really do need to be addressed. There's also the lack of clarity about what protections in law those who identify as non-binary have. So there are many battles and challenges ahead in relation to diversity and inclusion. It's therefore timely that we have such fantastic speakers here available for you tonight to provide their insights on the issues affecting them in their careers and the various protected characteristics that they're going to talk to you about. So I now invite you to join our first two talks. Matthew Jones, who's going to talk to you about being LGBTQ and a solicitor in 2020, and Yasmin Sheikh, and I hope I pronounced Yasmin's name correctly, who will be discussing the importance of disability and diversity in the workplace. To join these talks, click the session tab on the left of your screen and select the speaker who you want to join. Don't forget you can hop in and opt out to each talk and don't miss out. So thank you and enjoy your evening, and hopefully you will be with me at the end when I can give you some concluding remarks. Thank you.